Welcome to Proceed with Caution. How to approach your child when they're having a moment. Hi, I'm Martin Seville, your host and guide through this short session. And look, we know what it's like. Our children do have moments when they're frustrated or they're angry or they're upset, anxious, worried, sad. Because funnily enough, so do we as parents. They're just many versions of us. We're all human. But it really pulls at the heartstrings as a parent when our son or daughter is going through something and they're struggling. And the thing is with these moments is that it can be really difficult, especially for younger children. But I tell you, even into adulthood, sometimes we can feel something, but we can't eloquently describe what it is that we're feeling. And it comes out in different ways. So sometimes we might be really anxious or worried. Your child might be anxious and worried, but it comes out as frustration and anger. And sometimes we've got to be like a detective to try and figure out what's going on and what's really happening. So this short session, is going to cover three things when we're trying to approach a situation where our child is having a moment. And it could be anywhere, and we'll come on to that. And what we're going to discuss is three things. One, the state that you bring to that situation, and I'll explain what that means in a minute. The second thing is the environment in which it's happening. And then thirdly, how to actually approach it, the conversation, the interaction that you have with your child. And you'll notice that those first two, that's before you've even, it could be before you've even entered the room, certainly before you've interacted with your child. And this is really important. As parents, we've just got this instinct, right? We want to rush in and fix it, solve it, help. And we do. Any moment where our child is we feel they're in need, and we will rush towards them and try and figure it out. And that's a beautiful thing. Please don't lose that. However, this first thing about the state you bring to the situation is really important. I could talk about all the strategies and all that kind of stuff about the interaction between your child. But the state you bring to that situation, if that's not in the right place, all those strategies, all those things, they aren't going to be effective. So this is also not about being a child psychologist. This is not trying to get into their heads or anything like this. First and foremost, foundation level, we need to work on ourselves first, then the environment, then the interaction. So this whole thing about state, as a parent, it can be pretty stressful. It can be pretty frustrating. It can be pretty exhausting, right? Hands up to all the stressed and exhausted parents, right? So we might be, whether we're doing that full time, or whether maybe we've come in from working all day, or we've been working at home all day, but we come out of that and maybe that's got stresses and frustrations, or we feel stressed and frustrated through the day, whatever it might be. We've always got something going on. We might be on edge. We can really easily bring all of that to the moment. So your son and daughter is having a moment, whatever it is, an emotional outburst. If we don't check ourselves before we enter that situation, we could really easily add fuel to the whole situation. Now, our whole thing is to resolve it, to calm the child down and to help them, right? That's what we want to do, instinctively want to do. But if we bring all our emotion, all our stress, our frustration, our anger, our worry, our anxieties, or everything else that's going on in our life, if we bring that to the situation, we're just going to make it worse. We're probably going to do and say stuff that we will regret later. Parents don't need any more guilt, right? We do something that we don't feel was quite right. We'll be thinking about it for days, weeks, months. We'll even remember it in years to come. So the state that we bring to this situation is so important. And it's just, we're human, okay? So it's okay. But what we want to do, I mean, think about it. What do we say to children? You know, if they're like losing their temper or they're frustrated or angry, what do we say to them? We say, count to 10, right? You're going, Martin, you did not just tell me to count to 10. Well, I may have. But it's a little bit more than this. Our emotional side of us, the emotional part of the brain, kicks in within a split second. Any sort of emotion that we get, any reaction that we might have to an outside situation. So your child's having a moment, they're frustrated, they're upset, they're worried, they're anxious, they're angry, you can see that something's going on, you can hear them, maybe in the other room, and you can hear what's going on. Our immediate reaction is emotional. And that's going to happen every time because it kicks in before the logical part of our brain kicks in. Again, I'm not going to go into in depth about the brains, the minds, and how that all works. And just remember this bit: our emotion kicks in immediately. So when something happens, and if we've got all of that baggage, all that stress and frustration from our life, and as well as the initial emotional reaction to what's going on, we're going to bring it all to that situation, potentially make it worse. So what we just need to do is we just need to kind of check ourselves, just give us a moment for the logical part of our brain to kick in so we can go, right, okay, how can I best approach my son, my daughter in this moment? How can I help them in the best way? I know I've got a lot going on. There's tons of stuff going on, but right now my focus is helping resolve this moment with my child. If we can just let that kick in and then intentionally and deliberately step forward into the situation in a different state, a state that's going to be more reassuring, more calm, then we're more likely to be able to help our son or daughter out of the situation that they're in. And we're going to be able to do that quicker. And that's what we want, right? We want to resolve this as quickly as we can. So this is the first step that we need to understand to really tap into, to make sure that we bring our best self to the situation. Does that make sense? And I know it's difficult. Again, we're all human. I know it can be difficult. So it's not about getting it right every time. But if we can be more conscious of this more often than not, then we're more likely to approach the situation better more often than not. And the thing is, like I said before, we're so caught up with guilt as parents. If we don't think we ideally did that situation perfectly, if we didn't say the right things, if we didn't do the right things, and we mull it over in our heads and then we feel guilty about it afterwards, it's like we're human, we do the best that we can in the moment. So if we've got another little tool that just helps us like stop and go, right, okay, I know I've got a lot going on, right, they don't need that, let's do that. And whether this is our children or whether this is adults that we're dealing with, this is the same thing. What we bring to any situation is going to dictate the quality of that interaction and how quickly or not it gets resolved. So the first thing, our state, we've got that. I know I've drummed it in a little bit. I've gone on a little bit, but it's so important that I need to, because our instinct is just to rush in and solve things. And it's beautiful, but sometimes we just need to pause just for a moment. The second thing that I want to talk about. So there's a moment happening. We check ourselves, right? Okay, how can I bring my best self to this? Calm, reassuring, no matter what's happening in my world, because then we can resolve this quicker, and they're our focus. The other thing to be aware of is the environment in which this is happening. Now, sometimes we've got control over the environment, and sometimes we don't. Okay, so we might be out and about. We might be in the middle of a supermarket. We might be having a meal with the rest of our family at a restaurant. Or we might be at home. So sometimes we've got more control over the environment than in other places. But this, very often we think we don't have choices, but there are always choices and options. And as parents, it's kind of our role to get a little bit resourceful sometimes to help our child. But the environment has such a massive impact. And just to bring this to life for you, because this is something that we've realized over time with our children. I got 2 boys, and we love parties. We like celebrate every birthday. We celebrate Easter and Christmas and Halloween and anything and everything, right? Any excuse to just have fun and have a celebration, and we have family around and all that kind of stuff. So it's always a joyous occasion. We try and live our life like that every day. But there are moments when we go a bit bigger. And what we were finding was that more often than not, during these celebrations, which were great, uplifting things that our children were looking forward to, they might have a moment. I'm not saying they completely kick off, but they would have a moment during what we've been looking forward to, joyous, surrounded by family, love and music and having a great time and games and whatever it might be. But there'll be a moment, and it's really important for you to kind of have a handle on, again, I can't, this depends on your child, your son, your daughter, how they react to different things. From my experience, what was happening was there's often, with anything, as adults as well, there's an expectation of how things should go, right? And when that expectation isn't met, we kind of feel a bit deflated or a bit disappointed, or it could come out in all kinds of emotions, right? So whilst the party's in full flow and there's dancing and there's games and stuff like that, it's like everything's great. It's like everyone's having a great time. And then maybe there might be a lull, and there's like conversations going on, and there's like probably 4 or 5 different conversations happening in the room. There's probably some music playing on in the background. I'm not saying there would be a telly on at the same time, but sometimes maybe there's a telly on, and conversation. So there's noises, background noises, a lot going on. And maybe just during this time when there's just a bit of a lull in there's not an activity, might have a moment. And what then happened? Because they wanted to party and they wanted to do that, and there was just a little lunch. Maybe we were just getting some food ready or something like that, or having a conversation. And so all of a sudden they just felt a bit on edge. They felt like it wasn't going as they wanted, and so they get frustrated, and it would come out in all kinds of ways. Can you relate to this? You see, but this is where the environment comes in. Because when we feel like our expectations aren't being met, whether you're a child or whether you're an adult, all of a sudden we become hyper aware of everything. So in this example, all of a sudden there's like bit deflated, bit disappointed. All of a sudden they can hear every conversation going on. There's like, the grandparents, the aunties and uncles, us and nephews, all the conversation, every conversation is suddenly you can hear all the music happening at the same time. Even if it's low level music, just background music, all of a sudden there's that music and you're really hyper aware of it. You can hear the ticking clock. You can hear the next door neighbor's barking dog. You can hear the tumble dryers going off. I know the beeper on the oven's going off because they're preparing food. All of a sudden you become hyper aware of every sound and everything that's going on. And guess what? When you're in this kind of state where you're a little bit edgy, a little bit anxious, or a little bit frustrated, or a little bit sad, whatever that is, that moment, all of that noise, you become hyper aware of it, and it just consumes you. It fuels your emotion, and it makes it worse and worse and worse. And before you know it, you're like, ah! Can you relate? We noticed this was happening with our children. They would have a moment and we could resolve it, but what we wanted to do was make sure it wasn't going to happen every time. And become this common occurrence. It's like, well, what's happening? And so we realized this is what was happening. So they needed to be occupied, yes, but also as parents, you can't occupy them every single second of the day, but you have to be aware of that. But then you have to be aware of the environment. So in this situation, all of a sudden we realized, well, we just turn the music down, we coax them away to a quieter room in the house. Maybe we could go outside. And if you're, that would really help, because we would, all that overstimulation, we would kind of take that out of the equation, and then we can actually deal with what the real thing was. And if you can use this outside, so if you're in a restaurant, I know it's more difficult, but I bet there's a background music, there's lots of conversation, and then your child kind of like gets on edge or has a moment. It's like, well, how do you deal with that? Well, you go, well, I can't do anything. I can't control that, Martin. I can't control the music. I can't control everybody else. It's like, no, but maybe you could just move to a quieter area of the restaurant, or maybe a quieter area outside. Or maybe you could go back into the car. Just not forever, just for a moment. Just to help with the situation. And again, it might be in a busy supermarket. It's like parents' worst nightmare, isn't it? Right? In the middle of the frozen peas aisle, and your child just spontaneously combusts, right? But there are ways and means that, like, you're hyper aware then of everything. You're in hyper awareness, but it may well be that there still might be a quieter area or a corner of the store that you could go. You don't drag them kicking and screaming. That's not how you do it. We'll come on to that in a minute. But there might be a quieter area where it could help. And sometimes I find this with stores, I find this with outside places, like the staff will suddenly realize something's kicking off, and then they'll step in to help, and they go, we've got this room over here, might be helpful. It's actually for our first aid and stuff, but it might, if that would help, then it's a quieter space. So we can get resourceful, we can help. The environment has such a massive impact. It can really add fuel to a situation that isn't massive in the first place, but all of a sudden it becomes massive. And you get a bigger reaction. It's something even bigger to deal with. But equally, the environment, if we can move the things that we can control, if we can dial it down a little bit, then it's going to help us soothe the situation. Does that make sense? The environment, so important. So look, you'll notice we haven't even interacted with our child yet. You're going, man, they're still having a moment. Taking a while, they're still having a moment. It's like, it's okay, because this stuff happens in seconds or minutes, right? So now we're going to bring our best self to the situation, and we're going to be aware of the environment and look at what could be fueling or what we could do to help reduce that situation. What's in our control? And again, you look at this, let me remind you, look at this for your individual children. Yeah, because some loud noises or a lot of noise can really affect people, and sometimes it doesn't. Okay, so but once you've kind of thought about this and you've got this in your head, you'll be looking out for it, and then you'll go, oh, there's a pattern. Oh, it's always went, oh, and then you'll realize I've got some control over that, so I know that I can preempt it so it doesn't happen in the first place. Or if something does happen, I know what I can control. So these are the first two things, and they're all about you to begin with. That's the foundation of this. Now, what's that third step? When we then move into actually having some interaction with our son or daughter because they're having a moment, whatever that moment is, wherever it's happening, we've kind of done those other two things. What do we do next? Well, we do have to interact, right? But here's the thing, because again, we can rush in and stand over them and, what's wrong? What are you doing? Or the classic, they fought they fall over and you've told them, don't run. Please don't run. All they've heard is run. And they fall over, they scrape their knee, and you're like, no, why did you run? I told you not to run. Come on, who's been there? If you've got really young children, you haven't got there yet, it's coming. For everybody who's got older children, they're like, yeah. So the interaction, we bring our best self to it, and we understand the environment. What can we do? First thing I wanted to cover was kind of physical touch. Because sometimes, and I'm sure you've witnessed it, and it's not pleasant, somebody's kicking off in the supermarket and little Johnny or whatever is getting dragged across the supermarket floor, and it's like, it's just, intuitively know that's not going to help, right? So again, we've got to be really aware of how our children react, but also the emotions they're having, they will react in different ways. So if somebody is really angry, if you are really angry, really frustrated, right? You got that adrenaline going through your body, you're like really tense. If somebody came up to you and started trying to give you a hug or try to hold your hand, how's that going to make you feel? I mean, I'm a hugger, right? I love hugs. But if you are like really like our children can get, and it may well be that they're not angry, they're anxious, they're worried about something, but they just can't express that yet. But if you're really pent up like this, somebody coming in, you might think, oh, I want to soothe them, I want to give them a hug. It's like, maybe that's not the right thing, because they might shake that off. I'll tell you, there's nothing worse than having a hug shook off, right? Man, that hits you right there. It's like, what are you doing? I love you. I want to hug you. I want to make this better. And you've just shook off a hug. What? You want great? Well, let's not let the emotion take over. So physical touch is really important, but we've got to judge it, and we've got to understand how our own children react in different ways. But when we're really pent up, it's probably not the time to do lots of touching, okay? Lots of hugging or holding, because it's not the right thing to do. Now, if they just come down a little bit, you might well be able to. What I find is, just a touch on the hand or the arm, especially if they're a bit calmer, but maybe they're upset, so they're more worried, and they're not full of adrenaline, but they're just upset, worried, then a hug might do it, okay? You just got to judge it. Sometimes just holding the hand, holding the arm, it just reassures them that you're there. And it sounds weird because you are there, but there is power in touch. And I tell you what, it helps with a stressed, overwhelmed adult as well. If you can just, it's like there's something about that is just soothing. It's like, I'm not doing this alone. Does that make sense? Again, you need to judge this, but it's just kind of, when we don't think about this thing, we rush in, and then we do whatever. We might start giving them the interrogation, bringing our baggage, keeping the music and all the other distractions going, giving them a massive hug, and all we've done is just fuel the situation. And then how we feel and how they feel. And so just be aware of these things. So touch is really important. So just judge it. And the other thing about this is also be at their level. So don't just stand over them. And we don't do it on purpose, but we try, what's happened? What's wrong? You're kind of towering over them, especially young children, right? If you've got a teenager, it's probably like that now, right? Man, they grow up. Meet them at their level, yeah. That means you've got to sit on the floor or get on your knees, whatever it is. Meet them at their level, yeah. So it's not intimidating, it's not authoritarian. You're there. That looking in their eyes, that reassurance, that connection that you have, without even touching, that connection, just know you're there, especially if somebody is upset and worried and anxious. And then maybe a little bit of touch that might then go into a hug, can mean the world. It can make all the difference. Now, the other thing, last thing that I wanted to bring out in terms of this interaction is the sort of words that we use. Because what we can do is, we can give them the third degree. What's wrong? What's happening? And sometimes it's the tone we use if we brought the baggage. Sometimes it's just the way we're asking and not making it easy for them to respond. So if you're upset, think about it. If you're upset, you're angry, you're frustrated, somebody asks you a whole barrage of questions, how likely are you to answer them? How capable are you to answer all those questions in the moment? You're not really, are you? I mean, you can use softer words. So if you want to know what's wrong, if it's, an emotional moment, instead of saying what's wrong, you can say, hey honey, what is it? It's just a softer way of asking. But what I would encourage you to do is probably ask less open questions. As adults, we like to ask open questions because it's how we enter into discussion and dialogue, right? But in these moments, especially with our children, especially small children, or even teenagers, what you want to do in these emotional situations is make it really easy for them to be able to respond. And so yes or no questions are really helpful. But they can also, if they can't even get their words out, they can nod and they can shake their head. It makes it so much easier for them to be able to respond and for you to make some headway into what's happening and what they would like to do next. So again, if you're in that situation and there's the environment, it's like, should I turn the music down? It's like, cool. So would you like to go to the next door, to the next room, or should we pop to your bedroom? Yeah, I'd like that. Asking yes or no questions just makes it much easier for your child, especially when they're overly emotional, they're frustrated, angry, upset. It makes it easier for them to respond and for you to move forward in what to do next, but also what's wrong. Because the more that you engage, the more response you're getting, then the more likely it is you're going to resolve it quicker. Yeah. It's when they're still there going, and they're not giving you anything, that can be tricky, right? But again, we've got to look at all those other things as to what we're bringing, what we can control, how we go about it, the words we use, the questions we ask, to see if we can elicit a better response and therefore a better outcome. I really hope this has been helpful. I know to some of you, you're like, this is common sense, or this is just you teaching me to suck eggs, Martin, but this is foundation stuff. If it was this easy, everybody would be doing it, and there would be no parent on the planet that would be going, oh, I wish I didn't react like that, or oh man, I wish I didn't say that. But we're human, right? So it's really important for us to understand, remember, the state that we bring ourselves, the environment in which is happening, and then also how we interact, physical touch, level, and also the questions that we ask. And remember, you can, if you're a double act in terms of parenting, use each other. Your other partner, right? They might be having a stressful, frustrating time, and then something kicks off in the living room, and you can see them. They're just about to go, "What did you?" Right? You can go. You can remember this and go, right. Oh, okay. I need to be calm. It's like, it's okay, honey. I got it. I got this. I got you. You go for a walk. You stay in the other room. You go over there. I got this. Right? Now, if you're by yourself, and again, you just got to check yourself and go, right, okay, bring my best self to it. But let me just give you some words of encouragement as well here, because it's not about getting it perfect every time. Now that you know this, now that this is kind of in your head, if you did this 5 times out of 10, that's 5 better interactions you've had and situations you've been able to resolve, moments you've been able to resolve than you did before. And maybe that 5 goes up to 8. It probably will never be 10 out of 10 because we're human, and that's okay. So be kind to yourself. Remember, the state you bring yourself, the environment, and that interaction And I really, really wish you well. I hope you've got massive value from this. It's been a privilege to help you. And remember, you're already a great parent. And with everything else that you learn, it just means you're getting greater. Until next time, thanks for watching.